Match Point, your premier destination for news around the Power Esports Conference. We've got a packed show as always. We're into November for the PEC. Man, time flies. So stick around. We've got highlights, reaction, all coming up from the premier FBS Esports Conference in the country. Big shout out to the Idaho Air National Guard for making it all happen. And let's take a look what we got on today's shows today, because we have got a big one coming up for you today on PEC Match Point. First, of course, we're going to go around the PEC. We'll take a look at highlights from Week 6. Couple of big games. Definitely some big movement in the standings. Baylor continues to dominate Rocket Leagues. We'll take a look at everything the Bears have been doing right. Boise State picks up a big win in VALORANT, but they did suffer their first map loss of the season. Plus, we'll look ahead to Week 7 and give you some by-the-numbers for Rocket League. Again, Baylor is absolutely dominating right now, and we need to take a little bit more on what they're doing. But first, we hop into the highlights. Again, it was Michigan State and Baylor kicking off Week 6 of PEC Rocket League. Michigan State was last year's runner-up. They won a game 2-1, but Baylor quickly stomped out any hopes of a Game 5. The Bears took the series 3-1. They are now 6-0. The Spartans kept it close. They lost by only a single goal in the deciding Game 4, but Raxster helped prevent a Game 5, scoring 2 goals for the Bears to put away the series. Again, this Baylor team looks absolutely unstoppable. However, in the game that Michigan State won, the ending was absolutely phenomenal. Let's take a look at Michigan State's Game 3 victory, how it sounded.
It's control. 50 with Raxster. Morvu to drop it. Not able to. Andy's going to have boost here. Bump JT cool, bro. Raxster with 30. Dropped by Oppa. Oh, kept by Andy. Please. Morvu off the back wall. It's been 30 seconds. Andy pops it. Up by Oppam. 30 boost. No reset. 50 down, and it gets there. 2-1. Wow.
As we move on, second place team in the PEC Rocket League, it is Boise State. They picked up their second straight 3-0 after they lost to Baylor 3 weeks ago. The Broncos held the Utes to just 4 goals across the 3 games, while the Boise State offense put 15 in the back of the net. Dirt, though, had 7 goals and 5 assists. Boise State is 4-1, and they are right on the heels of Baylor. The Utes, they had a good performance. Brand J put in 2 goals and 4 saves of his own. Unfortunately, in the loss, Utah is going to drop down to 1-4. But again, this Ute squad making it work. Syracuse and Minnesota. By the way, Minnesota and Syracuse, the Orange started out the season very, very slow. They had a tough schedule. Michigan State and then Boise State back-to-back. They are now back to 500 with a 3-0 sweep over Minnesota. They are 4th place in the standings, and this was a very, very tight series. Game 3, 4-3 win for Syracuse. The loss leaves the Gopher at the bottom of the standings, but this team, they've been showing a lot of promise. They can definitely turn things around. And in the nightcap of PEC Rocket League, Kansas, they rallied after being swept by Boise State last week with a sweep of their own before their bye. The Jayhawks, they took down Ohio State 3-0. But as we've seen across the PECs this year, these sweeps are a lot closer than they appear. Every single game decided by a single goal. Maeve led the way for the Jayhawks, 5 goals, 6 saves, a great performance for them. CJ for Ohio State had their own 4-goal performance, but it wasn't enough. The series stayed close, but Kansas picked up the win. As we take a look at the standings for Rocket League, see where everybody shakes out after Week 6. Again, we've got Baylor up at the top. They are 6-0. Boise State right behind them. The Broncos lone loss, of course, to that Baylor squad. Michigan State at 3-2. And then, again, this log jam here, I think this goes from about 4 to 7. Syracuse, Kansas, Ohio State, and Nebraska, all separated by a half game or less. I mean, throw Michigan State in there as well. Anything can happen. There's a lot of movement left to be done, but the question remains, can anybody run down the Baylor Bears? Moving on to PEC Overwatch, Week 6 featured the return of the defending champs. After a slow 1-2 start to the year, Boise State took care of business. They took down Utah 3-1, ending the Utes' 2-game winning streak. The win has the Broncos right back in the mix at 2-2 with clear back for the team. Boise State looks like a title threat again. Utah, after a 2-game winning streak, unfortunately, fall back below 500. They are 2-3, but that team has proven they can compete with anybody in the PEC. And after the game, Boise State Overwatch head coach and director Doc Haskell talked a little bit about what to expect from this Boise State squad now that they've turned the corner.
Yeah, we're not at the top of the leaderboard. It's not the end of the season yet either. We have to win these games absolutely when we have them, but more importantly when we're in Vegas. So we'll just take each game, we'll learn as much as we can. We're not going to make excuses about who we had, who we didn't have. We've got the same schedule that everybody else does. We've got to find a way to win these games. And hats off to Kansas and really everybody, Syracuse, for putting together amazing teams. The level is up, and we just have to match it.
Speaking of Syracuse, they continued their hot start. The Orange quickly dismantled an upstart Minnesota team 3-0. That puts the Orange at 4-1. They're just a game back of the Buckeyes. While for Minnesota, the loss moves them down to 2-2. They're now tied with Boise State for that 4th place spot, and the Gophers holding on to fringe title hopes. And then in the nightcap, Ohio State, it was a showdown, well, supposed to be a showdown against Kansas in a 1-2 matchup. It was over quickly. The Buckeyes continued their dominance in PEC Overwatch, a 3-0 sweep. They are now 5-0. Entering November, the Buckeyes have now dropped only 2 maps all season and are massive favorites to make a run at the title in Vegas next spring. For the Jayhawks, they're going to look to regroup. They're now 3-2. They still hold on to that 3rd place spot in the standings, though, as we take a look at how everything went down in Week 6 of PEC Overwatch. As we've got Ohio State at the top. They're 5-0. Syracuse right behind them. Again, as we were talking about, Boise State, they took down Utah 3-1. Couple of sweeps there to follow. Syracuse 3-0 over Minnesota. Ohio State, again, we thought this was going to be a matchup between the top 2 teams in the PEC, and Ohio State absolutely ran through Kansas. Baylor and Nebraska, they were on a bye. As we take a look at the standings, see how everything's set up. Ohio State, they're 5-0. Syracuse is 4-1. Kansas at 3-2. Minnesota at 2-2, and there's that Boise State team. They are lurking at 2-2. If they get hot, watch out. Utah 2-3. I think, again, much like in Rocket League, teams 3 through 7, very, very competitive. Baylor's put up a couple tough fights, and then Nebraska there at the bottom. Moving on to PEC VALORANT, defending champs Michigan State. They were taking on Baylor and PEC kill leader Truth Messenger, and the Spartans did the best to limit him in a 2-0 sweep over the Bears. 3 Spartans nabbed at least 30 kills, with Kursut leading the way. And they also, by the way, held Truth Manager to just 7 kills in Game 2 to grab the sweep, and Michigan State remains 3rd in the PEC. Moving on to one of the teams ahead of Michigan State, it's Boise State and Utah, and this was a first for Boise State. The Utes snagged the first ever map win against the Broncos, 14-12. Boise State would rally to win 13-9, 13-11, take the series and improve to 5-0. Skies led the way for Broncos with a massive 61 kill performance, just enough to outlast Austin, who had 72 kills and 48 assists for the Utes. Absolutely crazy series. Kills were going back and forth throughout. The Utes, though, they are 3-2. They prove that they can hang with anybody, but still, Boise State at the top. Speaking of Boise State at the top, Ohio State is up there as well. They continued their VALORANT dominance. The Buckeyes yet to drop a map. They're 5-0, and they went 2-0 over Kansas, who is 2-4. 4 different Buckeyes nabbed at least 30 kills. All 4 of them, by the way, had a 1-0 KD. They're putting up crazy stats there at Ohio State. The Jayhawks, they nearly took Game 2, by the way. It was a 13-10 loss, 20 kills for Angel, but just wasn't enough as Ohio State ran through them. And in the last game of the week, Syracuse, they started 0-4. There were a lot of questions about how good this team can be. They just ripped off their 2nd win in a row, a sweep over Minnesota. Pretz has an amazing series for the Orange, 64 kills. That puts them up in the standings, only a game and a half out of 4th. Minnesota had a lot of hype. They fall down to 1-3, but again, that team could get hot at any moment as we see how the games went down. Lots of sweeps, and again, Utah picking up that first map win. Very, very impressive. As we take a look at the standings, again, it's Ohio State and Boise State at 5-0. They were in a deadlock tie last week with that map loss. Ohio State now has the tiebreaker. Michigan State, they're at 3-1. They're the defending champs. Utah right there at 3-2. And then Syracuse, they're hot. Look out if you're playing the Orange, 2-4 alongside Kansas. And then Minnesota, Nebraska, and Baylor round out the bottom of the list. But again, any of these teams can beat anybody. That's how close the PEC has been. And then finally, in Smash, crazy week here in Smash, Michigan State, they remain on top. They are 2-0. They take down Baylor 16-1, 16-2. Michigan State is 5-0 right now this season. Baylor 0-6. And this Spartan team looks incredibly strong. We had a big game. This was a massive series. We've talked about Minnesota Smash a lot. They started out hot. Questions if their schedule was maybe a little bit soft. They'd lost 2 in a row. They take down a stacked Syracuse team 2-1, 14-9, and then 13-8 for Minnesota, with Syracuse winning that lone map 12-11. Both these teams are now 3-2, tied with each other. And look out. Again, Syracuse was projected by a lot of teams to go very far. This Minnesota team taking care of them is actually pretty shocking. Ohio State and Kansas met. Kansas with a quick 2-0, 13-9, 14-9. The Jayhawks, they're right there at 3-2 as well. Ohio State, they are 0-4. As we take a look at the standings, Nebraska, they were on a bye. They're 4-0 up there with Michigan State, who is at 5-0. Then you've got Kansas, Syracuse, Minnesota, 3-2, 3-2, 3-2. Boise State had the bye this week. They're down there. they could get hot as well. PEC Smash is looking very, very strong. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, it's already November. Can you believe it in the PEC? We're going to preview Week 7, and we're going to take a deep dive into exactly how dominant Baylor Rocket League has been. They are putting up insane stats. All that coming up on PEC Match Point.
My friends know me as Derek, but I'm also Master Sergeant Raxster. This is my life in the Air National Guard.
Welcome back into PEC Match Point. If you want more from the Power Esports Conference, head over to the official PEC website for everything you need, from power rankings, player profiles, to predictions, analysis, and advanced stats. There's some crazy stats, especially for VALORANT, that you make sure you want to go check out. Stay informed, stay connected, and stay ahead of all things PEC. Head over to pec.leagueos.gg. On Week 7 of PEC Rocket League, action across the board. Baylor cemented themselves at the top, but that logjam in the middle, everybody is in must-win mode. We start with the 2024 PEC runners-up. They couldn't quite hang with Baylor. They're 3-2. They're taking on a Utah team that's maybe hoping to rebound. Utes are coming off a 3-0 loss to Boise State at 1-4. They're only a game and a half out of 4th place. The Utes could easily sneak their way back in. Boise State, they're the defending PEC national champions. They remain in striking distance of Baylor. They're at 4-1, and this might be a bit of a trap game here. You're taking on an 0-5 Minnesota squad who's had some very, very close games, just hasn't found that first win. I think Minnesota is going to make Boise State work for this one. Ohio State and Baylor, really, can anybody slow down Baylor? They're 6-0. They took care of Michigan State with ease last week. They have yet to play a must-win Game 5 at all this season. Meanwhile, for Ohio State, they're at 2-3. They're only a game out of 3rd place. And a win could all of a sudden make them a very scary team. Make sure you watch that one and see what happens. And then Syracuse and Nebraska, they wrap it up. And teams that are just really starting to shake off slow starts. Syracuse started 0-2. They've now rallied to 3-3. Nebraska, they won 2 in a row before their bye last week to get 2-3. It's a pair of hot teams that could easily be making noise in the spring. By the way, the Orange have the 2nd best goal differential in the PEC despite that record. That is a very, very stacked team. And then Kansas, they're on the bye. They're at 3-3 in 5th place. But again, 3rd place to 7th place is separated by a game or less. And speaking of Baylor Rocket League, let's take a look at the stats, the scoring leaders in PEC Rocket League through Week 6. And you'll notice a very, very familiar name at the top. You've got Andy leading the way, 27 goals. Right behind him, his teammate Raxster. He's got 21. The Bears are on fire. Big shout out to Nebraska, by the way. Again, as we said, they've won 2 in a row. You see them, Creed RL and Mincy, they're 3rd and 4th. And then you've got Promising down there, just making it in to that top 10. There's Baylor once again. All 3 Baylor Bears in the top 5 for goals. Very high up in assists as well, especially demos. This is a very physical Baylor team. And then Boise State, of course, the defending champ. You've got Woozy, Dirtho, and Preston sort of rounding out that list, as well as Opbomb making an appearance. So you would expect Baylor, Michigan State, and Boise State to be there. I want to shout out Nebraska as well. The fact the Cornhuskers are there means that is a very, very scary team. As we head over into Week 7 of PEC Overwatch, the defending champs appear they have risen from the ashes, and that is scary news for everybody. Again, after a slow start, they took care of business. Boise State did. They took down a surging Utah team, and now they take on a Minnesota team that has displayed flashes of brilliance this year. Both teams are 2-2, tied in the standings for 4th place. The Broncos do not want a 3rd loss this early in the season, and if Minnesota can pull off a win, that would send big noise to the rest of the PEC. Keep an eye on that one. Ohio State, they have continued their dominance. They 3-0'd 2nd place Kansas. They have a massive matchup next week. It's going to be Ohio State, Boise State, but the Buckeyes, they can't be looking ahead. This could be a trap game against the Baylor squad, who at 1-4 is looking for that spark to get that second half revival. And then finally, Syracuse and Nebraska going to round things out. Of course, Syracuse, 2nd in the standings. They know Boise State is coming. They cannot drop a game. Nebraska coming off a bye, hoping to turn the corner. Again, Syracuse kind of started the year with a big upset. Will they make sure they aren't the victims this week? Time will tell. Utah, they saw their 2-game winning streak and then snapped. And then Kansas, who's fresh off a beatdown at Boise State, they're both going to get the bye to sort of regroup. In VALORANT, the 2 top teams again, Boise State and Ohio State are going to meet in Week 8. You cannot get caught looking ahead. We start, though, with Michigan State and Utah. This is a battle for third place. Both these squads looking to keep pace with those two undefeated teams at the top of the standings. The Spartans are the defending PEC national champs, and they could risk going into the later half of the fall semester in fourth place in the standings. As this U team, they have been very dominant. They've got a lot of talented names. They gave Boise State their first map loss. This should be a very fun one. Boise State, they're going to face off with a Minnesota roster that a lot of people were talking about at the start of the year. They're only 1-3 for the Gophers, but they can make Boise State work for it. I think Minnesota has the talent. After Boise State sort of showed their morality last week and a big showdown looming, will Boise State get caught looking ahead, or will they take care of business? Speaking of looking ahead, Ohio State keeps rolling. They are 10-0 in maps, 5-0 overall. Can they continue their perfect streak, or will Baylor and Truth Messenger be able to pull off a massive upset? It's sort of this best team versus best individual. Again, Truth Messenger leads the PEC in kills by a decent margin. This should be a fun series, and again, another one of those trap games. Got to make sure Ohio State's not looking ahead to next week. Syracuse, they're looking to nab their third straight win and go from 0-4 to 3-4, and right in that title mix, they're going to take on a Nebraska team coming off a bye. The Cornhuskers lead the PEC in 3-game series this year, but they just have not been able to get it done in those game threes. So this is a squad that I think is a little bit better than the record shows. And then Kansas, they are on the bye. And wrapping up week 7 of the PEC, we have Smash. We had a massive game last week for Syracuse, and now we have another one this week. But the Orange, not in the minds they were hoping they were going to be coming into this week against an undefeated Nebraska squad. But we start at the top. It's Boise State. They're 1-3. They're taking on a Minnesota squad who just pulled off a huge win. The Broncos coming off a bye. If they get a win here, they could be right back in the thick of things. Ohio State and Baylor, they're going to battle for their first win of the year. Again, we heard from the director of Ohio State that this is a young team, so a win here could mean a lot, and same for Baylor. They're able to pick up that first win. You never know what can happen. And then in the final game of the week, it's Nebraska, who is 4-0, taking on a Syracuse team that just lost to Minnesota. They're 3-2. This has massive implications. If Nebraska gets the job done, we might have just a 2-horse race atop the standings. Make sure you want to tune in for that. Speaking of top of the standings, Michigan State, who is 5-0, they're off this week, as well as Kansas, who's right in the middle. They're at 3-2. They're off as well. Again, week 7 of the PEC, there are massive games across the board. Cannot wait to see. I think this is a big Smash week. If you're a Smash fan in the PEC, you're going to be feasting this week because a lot of these matchups are fantastic. That'll do it for us here on PEC Match Point. Make sure you join us next week to get caught up on all of the action. Again, we only have 3 more weeks left of the fall semester. You're going to want to make sure you know how these teams are doing as we head into the spring. Again, if you want any more information, you want to deep dive into the stats, head over to pec.leagueos.gg for everything Power Esports Conference. PEC Match Point has been brought to you by the Idaho Air National Guard. Good luck to all of the teams this week, and we can't wait to see everybody next week.